My daughter was in labor, screaming in pain, when her husband walked out. He called me free babysitting and spoke of his new, younger love right there in the hospital. I simply smiled, but beneath that calm, a storm was brewing. He thought he won, but he had no idea of the power I held. Like and share if you're ready to see what happens next, and tell me where you're listening from. The shrill insistence of her phone jarred Eleanor awake, slicing through the deep quiet of 3:47 a.m. Her heart immediately clutched with a familiar maternal dread. It was Clara. Mom. Her daughter's voice was a thin, reedy whisper, laced with a pain that went beyond the physical. The baby is coming. Vincent left me. He's gone. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, confirming Eleanor's worst fears. Her son-in-law, Vincent, was a man she had never fully trusted, a man whose charm always felt a little too practiced, a little too hollow. But to abandon his wife during childbirth? That was a cruelty Eleanor hadn't imagined even he was capable of. Eleanor scrambled out of bed, her mind racing even as her hands fumbled for her car keys. The drive to Mercy General Hospital in Sacramento was a blur of streetlights and anxious thoughts. Each turn of the wheel felt agonizingly slow, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Dread gnawed at her, a cold, hard knot in her stomach. What state would she find Clara in? She found her daughter slumped in a wheelchair in the emergency entrance, her face pale and streaked with tears, her belly swollen with the life that was pressing to enter the world. Clara looked utterly lost, a fragile mess of pain and betrayal. A nurse, her expression a mix of concern and indignation, confirmed what Clara had already whispered. Mr. Davies left about an hour ago, Mrs. Vance. Said he had an emergency. An emergency? Eleanor's jaw tightened. There was no emergency more urgent than the birth of your child, than the well-being of your wife. Inside the sterile confines of the delivery room, as the contractions began to intensify, Clara finally confided the full depth of Vincent's perfidy. Her voice was broken, punctuated by gasps of pain. He said he found someone who makes him happy, Mom. Someone younger, someone better. The words were like daggers, tearing through Clara's already raw emotions. Eleanor sat by her daughter's side, holding her hand, a silent witness to a heartbreak deeper than any physical pain. For 6 long hours, she watched Clara endure, her tears of emotional anguish mixing freely with the agony of labor. Each wail, each strained breath, solidified a burning rage within Eleanor that she carefully kept hidden. Finally, at 9:52 a.m., a new life entered the world. Baby Leo, 7 pounds 4 ounces of pure, innocent potential, let out a lusty cry that momentarily pushed away the shadows of despair. He was perfect, a tiny miracle with a shock of dark hair and surprisingly strong grip. As Eleanor cradled her grandson, a flicker of hope pierced through the gloom. Clara, exhausted but radiant, looked at her son with a love so profound it brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Leo, Clara whispered, her voice still weak but resolute. After Dad, after Arthur. The name was a quiet tribute, a poignant reminder of the strong, loving father Clara had lost years ago, a stark contrast to the spineless man who had abandoned her. It was almost an hour later when Vincent finally sauntered in, not with apologies or concern, but with a dismissive air, his eyes glued to his phone screen. He looked annoyed, as if the entire ordeal had been an inconvenience to his carefully curated schedule. He offered a perfunctory, "So it's a boy, huh?" without even looking up from his messages. Then, without pause, he began to speak, not to Clara, but into his phone, his voice a low, infuriating drone. "Yes, Felicia, I'm just here for the logistics. We need to discuss the new apartment, the lease transfer, all of it." Eleanor watched in horrified silence as Clara's soul visibly shattered. Vincent, standing there so cold and detached, discussed child support, visitation schedules, and how his new life with Felicia would be structured. He spoke as if Clara and Leo were just minor administrative hurdles in his grand new beginning. It was a calculated, brutal act of emotional violence, laid bare in the most vulnerable of moments. Then he turned to Eleanor, a patronizing smile gracing his lips. "And of course, Eleanor, you'll be available for free babysitting, won't you? It'll make things easier for everyone." The casual dismissal, the entitlement in his voice, ignited a dangerous spark in Eleanor. her hands clenched, her nails digging into her palms. Free babysitting. He saw her only as a convenience, an elderly woman to be exploited, utterly unaware of the true power she wielded, of the $28 million inheritance from Arthur she had meticulously managed and grown for years, a secret she had guarded fiercely. She forced a polite, if strained, smile, a perfect mask concealing the raging storm beneath. He had no idea. Vincent, satisfied with his performance, leaned down, planted a superficial kiss on Clara's forehead, snapped a quick photo of himself with the baby, and then, with a final indifferent glance, walked out. He left, undoubtedly convinced he had won, that he had neatly untangled himself from his responsibilities and could now embark on his happy new life. Eleanor turned to Clara, her anger momentarily receding to make way for a profound tenderness. She smoothed Clara's hair, her gaze meeting her daughter's tear-filled eyes. "He made his choice, darling," Eleanor said, her voice soft but firm. "Now we make ours. And Vincent will pay for this. He will pay for every single tear, every single insult, every single moment of pain he has inflicted upon you. I promise you." The weeks that followed Leo's birth were a raw, agonizing tableau for Eleanor. She watched Clara, her usually vibrant daughter, navigate the crushing weight of new motherhood alone, her joy over her son constantly overshadowed by the gaping wound of Vincent's betrayal. Clara was a ghost of herself, her eyes perpetually tired, her spirit dimmed. She'd spend hours gazing at Leo, a bittersweet mix of love and sorrow clouding her face, a silent testament to the man who had abandoned them. Every time Leo cried, Clara flinched, as if the sound itself amplified the emptiness Vincent had left behind. Eleanor's heart ached with a profound, helpless anger as she witnessed her daughter's struggle, the quiet dignity with which Clara tried to stitch her shattered life back together. It brought Eleanor back to the first time she had truly met Vincent Richardson, 6 years ago, at Clara's 25th birthday party. He had arrived, a whirlwind of confident charm and practiced smiles, his eyes scanning the room not for people, but for opportunities. Eleanor remembered a chill creeping up her spine, an instinctive unease that had nothing to do with a mother's natural protectiveness. She had seen that glint in men's eyes before, a hunger for status, for advantage, carefully masked by superficial pleasantries. Vincent, ever the astute observer of social hierarchies, had barely acknowledged Eleanor. He saw a widow neatly dressed but unassuming, a woman he likely pegged as struggling financially, certainly not someone worth his time or strategic investment. His gaze had swept over her, lingered briefly on her simple pearl necklace, and then dismissed her entirely, moving on to more promising conversations. It was a calculated assessment, cold and precise, and it had confirmed Eleanor's initial apprehension. She was a mere background character in his ambitious narrative, utterly irrelevant. Eleanor had tried, gently at first, to voice her concerns to Clara. "He seems very focused on material things, darling," she'd suggested over coffee, choosing her words with care. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Clara, however, was in the intoxicating throes of what she believed was true love. Her eyes would light up when she spoke of Vincent's grand plans, his lofty ambitions. "He's just driven, Mom," she'd counter, a defensive edge to her voice. "He wants to give me the life I deserve. A good life." Clara had always yearned for a certain stability, a comfort that had been a little shaken after Arthur's sudden passing. Vincent had effortlessly tapped into that yearning, promising to fill the void with material abundance. He had painted a dazzling picture of a future filled with luxury, security, and effortless success. And Clara, blinded by affection and hope, had seen it as her rightful destiny. She was convinced Vincent was the man who would provide her with everything she'd ever wished for. Eleanor's warnings, whispered and indirect as they were, had been brushed aside, absorbed by the tide of Clara's infatuation. She had watched with a growing sense of foreboding as Clara drifted further into Vincent's orbit, her dreams becoming inextricably linked to his ambitions. A pang of guilt, sharp and familiar, pricked Eleanor. She recalled Arthur's last days, his voice weak but clear as he held her hand. "Promise me you'll be careful about the money, Elle. Don't let it change who you are, and don't let it attract people who would love your wallet more than your heart." His wisdom had been a constant guide, and his warning echoed eerily in the wake of Vincent's betrayal. Arthur, her beloved husband, had been a brilliant and incredibly shrewd businessman, amassing a fortune that few knew the true extent of. His passing, while heartbreaking, had also brought with it a revelation: a meticulously managed estate worth a staggering $28.4 million. This immense wealth had been kept a secret, known only to Eleanor, her discreet and utterly loyal lawyer, and her equally trustworthy financial advisor. Not even Clara knew. Eleanor's motive for this elaborate concealment wasn't malice or control. It was a profound desire to protect Clara, to shield her from the very kind of opportunistic individuals Arthur had warned them about. More than that, Eleanor had wanted to see who Clara would become, truly without the pervasive influence of inherited wealth. She wanted her daughter to develop her own character, her own drive, her own sense of self-worth, unburdened by the expectations or the potential dangers that such a fortune could bring. Now, watching Clara weep silently over her newborn son, her heart shattered by the man she had loved, Eleanor realized with a searing clarity that her fears had been chillingly prescient. Vincent was not merely a person Arthur warned about. He was the epitome of such a person. He saw women as commodities, relationships as transactions, and vulnerability as an opportunity for exploitation. His heart was as empty as his promises, filled only with a relentless pursuit of self-interest. But the secret Eleanor had guarded so fiercely, the inheritance Arthur had entrusted to her, was not just a burden or a shield. It was a powerful tool, a finely honed weapon she had kept sheathed, waiting for the precise moment it would be needed. That moment had arrived. Vincent had awakened a force he could not comprehend, a silent resolve in a woman he had so carelessly dismissed. He had played his hand, thinking he held all the cards. He was gravely mistaken. Eleanor had watched, powerless, as Vincent systematically chipped away at Clara's spirit over the past few years. It began subtly, an insidious erosion of her daughter's independence. First, he had suggested Clara quit her teaching job. "Darling, with my income, you don't have to work. You can focus on making our home perfect, on pursuing your hobbies." Clara, flattered by the perceived generosity, had initially thrived, but soon her life began to shrink. Then came the gentle dissuasions from seeing her friends, the subtle critiques of their negative influences. Clara, ever eager to please Vincent, gradually drifted away from those who loved her most, becoming increasingly isolated, more dependent on him for her sense of self-worth. Eleanor had always maintained her facade, a quiet, unassuming widow, easily underestimated. This allowed her to observe Vincent's true nature with chilling clarity. She remembered one particular evening, standing just out of sight in the kitchen, when she overheard Vincent's voice, low and conspiratorial, speaking to Clara in the living room. "Your mom seems nice enough, honey, but we need to make sure she doesn't become a burden. Old people can be expensive, you know. Nursing homes, medical bills, it all adds up." Eleanor's grip on the kitchen counter tightened until her knuckles went white. Expensive? Burden? The words echoed in her mind, laced with an irony that was almost unbearable. She knew down to the last cent that her conservative investment returns alone far exceeded Vincent's paltry salary. But she kept silent, a placid smile fixed on her face when she emerged, offering to help with the dishes. Every slight, every casual cruelty, every manipulative whisper, Eleanor carefully catalogued, etching them into the ledger of her memory. Vincent's tactics grew bolder, more direct. He systematically picked apart Clara's confidence, criticizing her cooking. "Are you sure you used enough salt? It's a little bland, isn't it?" Her appearance. "That dress isn't really flattering. Nah, you should try something that hides your hips more." Even her intelligence. "You know, sometimes your ideas are a little simple, Clara, but that's okay, you're sweet." He'd punctuate these barbs with a patronizing pat or a dismissive chuckle, making them seem like playful jabs, never truly malicious. He subtly twisted her perception of reality, convincing her that despite her humble circumstances, a coded reference to her supposedly modest upbringing without the secret wealth, she was incredibly lucky to have him. He was the prize, the rescuer, elevating her to a status she otherwise wouldn't achieve. Clara, her self-esteem slowly eroded, began to believe it. She clung to him, desperately seeking his approval, oblivious to the emotional cage he was building around her. Eleanor continued to play her role, the grateful mother-in-law, always offering to help, always smiling, always listening. She baked cookies, offered advice, and observed. Each interaction was a data point, further solidifying her understanding of Vincent's predatory nature. The extent of his calculating cruelty became starkly clear during a minor health scare Eleanor experienced about a year before Leo's birth. A routine checkup flagged some abnormal blood work, leading to a period of anxious tests. When Vincent heard about it, he didn't offer comfort or concern. Instead, he made an offhand remark to Clara, "Well, if it turns out to be serious, Mom's potential illness could be a blessing in disguise for Medicaid coverage. It would certainly ease our future financial burden, wouldn't it?" Eleanor, overhearing this from the next room, felt a cold dread seep into her bones. He was already planning for her demise, calculating how her illness could benefit them, specifically him, financially. Later that evening, alone in her quiet home, Eleanor stared at her latest bank statements. The numbers shimmered, almost surreal. $28,400,000. Below that, the monthly investment returns, $150,000. It was a fortune beyond Vincent's wildest dreams, a reality he was utterly oblivious to. He saw her as a potential drain, a future cost. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. The final straw, the spark that truly ignited Eleanor's latent fury and propelled her from passive observation to decisive action, came when Clara announced her pregnancy 6 months before Leo's arrival. Eleanor had been overjoyed, but Vincent's reaction was a chilling contrast. He hadn't bothered to hide his annoyance. "Are you absolutely sure this is the right time, Clara?" he'd snapped, his voice tight with barely suppressed irritation. "Babies are incredibly expensive and time-consuming." He had then gone on to list all the ways a child would impede his career, his social life, his freedom. Eleanor understood with a sickening clarity that Vincent saw the baby not as a miracle, not as a symbol of their love, but as an insurmountable tie-down, a tiny, helpless obstacle to his pursuit of other women, other opportunities. His callous disregard for Clara's joy, his blatant self-interest at the announcement of his own child's impending arrival, was the ultimate insult. That night, as Clara wept softly in her bedroom, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's heart, Eleanor made a silent vow. The game was over. Vincent had pushed her too far. He had not only broken her daughter's heart, but had also dared to dismiss Eleanor as a burden, a financial liability. He had no idea what kind of burden she truly was. The time for observation was past. It was time for action. The very next morning, Eleanor initiated her private investigation, a meticulous unraveling of Vincent Richardson's carefully constructed life. The morning after Vincent's callous reaction to Clara's pregnancy announcement, Eleanor began to move. She spent hours in her study, a room Arthur had once filled with the scent of old books and the quiet hum of his legal work. Now it was her command center. With precise, measured movements, she retrieved an old leather-bound address book, a relic from Arthur's extensive network. He had always been a man who believed in having the right connections, and now Eleanor would leverage every single one. Her discreet phone calls began, a series of hushed conversations with former colleagues of Arthur's, private investigators he had occasionally employed for business matters, and even a retired police detective known for his meticulous methods. She offered generous fees, emphasizing the need for absolute discretion and comprehensive results. The findings trickled in over the next few weeks, a steady stream of damning information that painted a picture far darker than Eleanor had even anticipated. Vincent Richardson, it turned out, was not just casually unfaithful, he was a serial deceiver. Her investigation uncovered a disturbing 2-year history of multiple affairs with various women, a rotating cast of fleeting romances, each one meticulously hidden from Clara. He had a pattern, a predictable playbook, charming, attentive, then dismissive once the thrill wore off, always moving on to the next conquest. The current affair, the one with Felicia Stone, was the most significant. Felicia, a 24-year-old marketing assistant, had been dating Vincent for a solid 8 months. The details were excruciatingly precise. The names of restaurants they frequented, the specific hotel chains where they spent clandestine weekends, even the gifts Vincent had purchased for her using a separate, undeclared credit card. What was even more infuriating was the elaborate web of lies Vincent had spun for Felicia. He had convinced her he was a lonely, misunderstood man, trapped in a loveless marriage, waiting for the paperwork to go through for his divorce. He had painted Clara as the unreasonable party, the one dragging her feet, delaying his supposed freedom. Eleanor meticulously collected every piece of evidence. There were grainy but undeniable photographs of Vincent and Felicia laughing intimately, holding hands, even sharing a kiss. There were credit card receipts showing dinners for two at upscale restaurants on nights Vincent claimed to be working late, hotel records from romantic getaways that coincided with business trips. And perhaps most damning of all, a trove of text messages unearthed by her skilled investigators, filled with pet names, declarations of love, and explicit plans for their future together. A future built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. Despite the mounting pile of evidence, Eleanor deliberately withheld this crushing truth from Clara. A part of her, a tiny, fragile maternal hope, still clung to the possibility that the impending birth of his child might awaken something decent in Vincent. Perhaps the profound experience of becoming a father would shake him from his selfish stupor, force him to confront his actions, and compel him to reconcile with his wife and embrace his responsibilities. Eleanor desperately wanted to believe in the transformative power of new life, even for a man as devoid of conscience as Vincent. But that desperate hope had been savagely extinguished the moment Vincent abandoned Clara at Mercy General Hospital. His dismissive attitude, his open discussion of Felicia, his complete disregard for Clara's pain and Leo's arrival, it had all confirmed Eleanor's worst fears. There was no decency to awaken, no conscience to stir. He was irredeemable. His actions in the delivery room solidified Eleanor's resolve, transforming her quiet determination into a cold, unyielding resolve. That night, back in her own home, Eleanor sat in the gentle glow of the nursery nightlight, rocking baby Leo. His tiny chest rose and fell in a peaceful rhythm, his small hand occasionally grasping her finger. In the silent darkness, a profound sense of clarity settled over her. Vincent had made his choice. He had chosen deceit over loyalty, selfishness over family, and a shallow illusion over a genuine connection. And now Eleanor would make hers. The gloves were off. The time for waiting, for hoping, for silent observation was over. Eleanor would not just expose Vincent. She would systematically dismantle his life, piece by piece, brick by brick. She would use the hidden power of Arthur's fortune, the wealth he had amassed, and she had guarded so diligently, not to destroy, but to exact justice, to protect her daughter and grandson, and to ensure that Vincent paid a price commensurate with the pain he had inflicted. He had underestimated her, dismissing her as a harmless, financially struggling widow. That would be his gravest mistake. Ready for the moment when a mother's patience snaps? You won't believe what happens next when Eleanor confronts her deceitful son-in-law. Hit like, share this story, and subscribe to follow every step of this unfolding drama. 3 weeks after Leo's birth, Vincent made his calculated return. Eleanor answered the door to find him clutching a wilting bouquet of cheap supermarket roses, their petals already drooping, a flimsy offering that perfectly encapsulated his sincerity. His posture was slouched, his hair disheveled, and dark circles underscored his eyes, giving him a false air of stress and exhaustion, as if he were the one who had suffered. He looked less like a grieving husband and more like a man who had spent 3 weeks chasing an unsustainable fantasy. Despite everything, Clara's face lit up with a desperate, heartbreaking hope when she saw him. Her tired eyes, so often shadowed with grief, flickered with a raw vulnerability that twisted Eleanor's gut. It broke her heart anew to see her daughter, after all the pain and abandonment, still clinging to the tattered remnants of a love that was never real. Vincent offered a perfunctory, awkward hug to Clara, then glanced at Leo, who was sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. He picked up the baby with an unfamiliar stiffness, holding him as if he were a fragile, unfamiliar object rather than his own son. The gesture felt rehearsed, devoid of genuine warmth. "He's small," Vincent murmured, almost to himself, before quickly handing Leo back to Clara. He immediately shifted to what he called practical matters, his voice devoid of emotion. So, Clara, Felicia and I have been talking, and we think it's best if I take Leo only on weekends. To give you a break and allow me to bond with him. He spoke as if he were discussing a business transaction, utterly oblivious to the fresh wounds he was inflicting. Clara, her voice barely a whisper, begged him, Vincent, please don't do this. What about us? What about our marriage? Her plea hung in the air, thick with unspoken pain and betrayal. She reached out to touch his arm, but he flinched away, pulling back as if her touch repulsed him. Clara, honestly, you're just too needy, too dependent, he stated, his tone chillingly cold. That's always been the problem. You're nothing like Felicia. She's independent. She understands what it takes to succeed. The comparison was a cruel, deliberate jab, designed to demean and diminish Clara even further. A flicker of anger finally ignited in Clara's eyes, a welcome spark amidst the overwhelming grief. Because of her, because of Felicia. The name was a venomous whisper, the realization of her husband's open infidelity finally dawning on her. Vincent snapped, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Yes, because of her, and because of you. Our marriage was broken long before Felicia, Clara. You just couldn't see it. He pointed an accusatory finger, shifting the blame entirely onto her, absolving himself of any responsibility. Eleanor, who had been observing in steely silence, now calmly interjected. Her voice was low, controlled, but laced with an icy precision that cut through the tension. Vincent, you mentioned logistics. Your proposed child support amount. It seems rather minimal given your stated income. And the weekend-only arrangement, with such a young infant, seems less about bonding and more about convenience for your new life. So, she paused, her gaze unwavering. My grandson's financial needs come second to your girlfriend's housing preferences? Is that what I'm hearing? Vincent's face flushed a deep crimson. The calm, rational tone of Eleanor's questioning infuriated him. What does Felicia have to do with this? He sputtered, visibly flustered. Well, you just mentioned her by name, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a subtle edge. And from what I understand, you've made quite a few promises to her. Promises of a committed relationship, a new apartment, perhaps even a future together. Promises that sound remarkably similar to the ones you once made to my daughter, Clara, in front of Quinn and our family. Eleanor's words were delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, each one slicing through his carefully constructed lies. He erupted, his voice rising to a furious roar. Your mother has always resented me, Clara. She just wants to drag you down to her level. She hates seeing you happy, seeing you with someone successful. He turned his furious gaze on Eleanor. You're just an old busybody with nothing better to do. Clara stared at Vincent, her eyes wide with horror and a dawning comprehension. The sheer venom, the raw cruelty in his words, directed not just at her, but at her mother, finally tore away the last vestiges of her illusions. The man she had loved, the man who was the father of her child, was a monster. Eleanor remained unflappable, her gaze as sharp and unyielding as polished steel. You're quite right, Vincent, she said, her voice eerily calm. Clara does deserve better. Much, much better than a liar and a cheat. She stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder. Then she delivered the final blow, her words ringing with quiet authority. And as for your proposed custody arrangement, there won't be any. Not with you. Vincent recoiled as if struck, his face contorted with a mixture of shock and rage. He stammered, his mind racing to comprehend the implications of her statement. What are you talking about? You can't just... Oh, but I can, Eleanor interrupted, her smile thin and knowing. And I will. He snarled a final impotent threat. You'll regret this, both of you. You have no idea what you're getting into. Before they could respond, he spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him, convinced he had left them shattered and defeated. He had no idea what Eleanor had just begun. The moment Vincent stormed out, leaving a stunned Clara and a simmering Eleanor in his wake. The quiet house filled with a new kind of silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Clara, still reeling from the encounter, retreated to her room, but Eleanor was galvanized. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning. That night, after ensuring Clara and Leo were settled, Eleanor moved with the calm precision of a general deploying troops. She went to her study, the room where she managed Arthur's legacy, and began making calls. The first call was to Robert Sterling, her financial advisor, a man whose loyalty and shrewdness were legendary. Eleanor didn't mince words. She recounted Vincent's abandonment, his chilling cruelty, and his absolute certainty that she and Clara were helpless, financially and otherwise. Robert, she concluded, her voice low and steady, you know the extent of Arthur's estate, and you know my capabilities. I need to know, how far are you willing to go to protect my family? There was no hesitation. As far as it takes, Eleanor, Robert replied, his voice firm. Just tell me what you need. Next, she called Sarah Davies, the private investigator who had meticulously unraveled Vincent's web of deceit. Sarah, a woman of few words but profound efficacy, simply listened, taking notes as Eleanor outlined her new expanded scope of work. I need every single detail, Sarah. Every skeleton in his closet, every loose thread, every vulnerability. Leave no stone unturned. The third call was to Daniel Lee, a family lawyer known for his ruthless efficiency and unwavering commitment to his clients. Daniel's reputation was one of a pit bull in the courtroom, and Eleanor knew he was precisely the weapon she needed. Daniel, I have a new case for you, a divorce, but not just any divorce. It's time to ensure Vincent Richardson pays for his transgressions in every possible way the law allows, and then some. Daniel's quiet affirmation was all Eleanor needed. With her team in place, Eleanor turned her attention to the financial mechanics. She contacted her bank manager, Michelle Evans, a woman who had handled Arthur's and now Eleanor's accounts for decades, and who understood discretion implicitly. Michelle, I need to make some immediate transfers. Her instructions were clear and precise. $100,000 to Daniel Lee, $50,000 to Sarah Davies, and $200,000 to establish a legal defense fund specifically for Clara Vance. These initial sums were merely the opening volley, a show of intent and resources. Then came the crucial transfer. And Michelle, I need $5 million moved from my primary account into a newly established, highly confidential account. Let's call it the Project Phoenix account. Michelle, who rarely questioned Eleanor's financial maneuvers, simply confirmed the instructions. This $5 million wasn't for legal fees. It was for something far more strategic, a tactical fund designed to exert pressure in ways Vincent couldn't even imagine. It was the first chess piece moved in a game he didn't even know he was playing. Hours later, as Eleanor sat nursing a cup of chamomile tea, her phone chimed. It was Robert Sterling. His voice, usually calm and composed, held a hint of grim satisfaction. Eleanor, I just got off the phone. Richardson Industries just lost their biggest client, Sterling Tech. Apparently, there were some serious concerns raised about the company's leadership and overall stability. Eleanor's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Sterling Tech was one of Arthur's former business ventures, a company he had built and nurtured before selling it off years ago, but one where he had retained significant influence through old partnerships and mutual agreements. Eleanor had merely made a few carefully worded inquiries, leveraging her own quiet influence and subtly highlighting recent internal shifts at Richardson Industries. The dominoes were already beginning to fall. The revenue hit will be catastrophic for them, Robert continued. We're talking a projected 40% drop, immediate layoffs, and partner pay cuts. Vincent Richardson, as a key partner, will feel this directly and significantly. Eleanor felt a grim satisfaction bloom in her chest. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about exposing Vincent's incompetence and protecting Clara from a man who would have bled her dry. He thought he was free, but his financial foundation, the very bedrock of his inflated ego, was already cracking beneath him. And one more thing, Robert added, his voice almost a purr. The bank will be contacting Vincent on Monday regarding that luxury condo application he submitted with Clara. They'll be requesting additional, very detailed financial documentation. Given the recent news, I don't anticipate a smooth process for him. Eleanor hung up, the faint smile still playing on her lips. Vincent had built his life on a house of cards, inflated by his own self-importance and a disregard for others. Now Eleanor was systematically blowing on that house, one card at a time. This was just the beginning. Monday morning dawned with a deceptive calm, Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing a light breakfast for Clara when the phone rang. It was Vincent, and even through the receiver, Eleanor could hear the frantic edge in his voice. Clara answered, her expression guarded. "Vincent?" she murmured, then listened, her eyes widening slightly. "Clara, put your mother on the phone," Vincent demanded, his voice tight with stress. Did she, did she do something to interfere with my job?" Clara, bewildered, handed the phone to Eleanor. Eleanor took it, her expression neutral. "Vincent," she said, her voice smooth and unruffled, "to what do I owe the pleasure of this rather early call?" Vincent didn't bother with pleasantries. "My company just lost the Sterling Tech account, and the bank just called, demanding more paperwork for the condo loan application." "What did you do, you old witch?" His voice cracked with barely suppressed panic, the facade of his inflated confidence rapidly eroding. Eleanor allowed a brief, almost imperceptible pause. "Vincent, I assure you my focus is entirely on my daughter and my new grandson. My days of corporate espionage are long behind me. Perhaps you should look closer to home for the reasons behind your misfortunes." She handed the phone back to Clara, who was now staring at her mother with a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion. Vincent continued to rant, convinced that Eleanor, in her unassuming widow guise, had somehow orchestrated his sudden professional downfall. He clung to this paranoia, unable to fathom any other explanation for his rapidly crumbling world. Clara, still too kind-hearted to truly believe her mother capable of such elaborate corporate sabotage, simply dismissed his accusations as outlandish. "Mom wouldn't do something like that, Vincent," she said, her voice weak but firm. "She doesn't even know anything about your business." Eleanor maintained a perfectly neutral expression throughout the exchange, her inner world alight with grim satisfaction. Her plan was unfolding exactly as she had envisioned. The first domino had fallen, striking at the very core of Vincent's self-worth, his career and his perceived financial prowess. As Clara tried to placate a furious Vincent on the phone, Eleanor's own phone buzzed with a new text message. It was from Marcus, one of Sarah Davies's key operatives, a man known for his stealth and efficiency. The message was succinct. "Phase 2 initiated. Expect contact from target within 24 hours." Eleanor knew exactly what Phase 2 entailed. It was about Vincent's carefully compartmentalized personal life, the one he had so arrogantly flaunted in Clara's face. Later that afternoon, a call came through from Sarah Davies. "Eleanor, I've just had a very enlightening conversation with Felicia Stone." Sarah's voice was dry, tinged with a hint of professional amusement. "It seems Vincent has been quite busy building a fantasy world for her." Sarah had contacted Felicia directly, presenting her with the irrefutable evidence of Vincent's deceit. The photographs, the hotel receipts, the text messages, and perhaps most damningly, the official documents confirming his ongoing marriage to Clara and the recent birth of his son, Leo. Felicia Stone, the younger, supposedly independent woman Vincent had so cruelly contrasted with Clara, had been utterly devastated. "She was shocked, Eleanor, absolutely furious," Sarah reported. "She initially refused to believe it, demanded proof, accused me of being a jealous ex. But once I laid out everything, the dates, the times, the pictures, the truth hit her like a freight train." The conversation had taken an unexpected turn. "And here's the kicker," Sarah continued, a note of triumph in her voice. "It turns out Felicia wasn't just being played emotionally. She'd been financially supporting Vincent. He had convinced her he was experiencing some temporary cash flow issues and had been living off her credit cards and her salary for months, promising to pay her back once his divorce settled and his new business venture took off." Eleanor's blood ran cold, a fresh wave of disgust washing over her. Vincent wasn't just a cheater, he was a parasitic manipulator, preying on Felicia's affection and financial stability while simultaneously building a life with Clara and then abandoning them both. He was playing both women, bleeding them dry in different ways, all for his own selfish gain. "So, what's her plan?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. "Oh, she has a plan," Sarah confirmed. "Felicia is planning a serious conversation with Vincent tonight, and she explicitly stated, and I quote, 'It's not going to go his way.' She's already contacted a lawyer about getting her money back, and she's ready to expose him to everyone she knows." Eleanor hung up, a chilling sense of anticipation settling over her. Vincent's carefully constructed web of lies was about to unravel completely, not just professionally, but personally. His meticulously crafted image, his carefully cultivated relationships, his entire carefully balanced deception. It was all about to come crashing down around him. The reckoning had truly begun. Tuesday morning, the phone rang early again. This time, Vincent's voice wasn't just stressed. It was raw with desperation, begging Clara to talk, to just listen. He sounded utterly broken, a stark contrast to the arrogant man who had stormed out just 2 days prior. Eleanor met Clara's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. This was it. When Vincent arrived at Clara's house a short while later, he was a ghost of his former self. His expensive suit was crumpled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes were bloodshot, reflecting a night of torment. He looked like he hadn't slept, hadn't shaved, hadn't eaten. The polished veneer, the practiced charm, had completely vanished, revealing a desperate, broken man beneath. He was practically unrecognizable from the meticulous, self-assured Vincent Eleanor had once observed. He launched into a rambling confession, his words tumbling out in a torrent of self-pity and thinly veiled blame. Felicia, she left me, Clara, just walked out, blocked my number, said I was a liar, a cheat. He pulled out his phone, showing Clara screenshots of damning photos and texts, undeniable proof of Sarah Davies' meticulous investigation. She's demanding her $73,000 back, Clara. $73,000! He sounded incredulous, as if her wanting her own money back was the ultimate betrayal. Then came the professional blow. And my position at Richardson Industries. It's been eliminated. They said restructuring, client losses. That Sterling Tech account was the final nail. His voice was barely a whisper, defeat etched onto his face. He was unemployed, deeply in debt to a furious ex-mistress, potentially homeless, and utterly alone. With no other options, he turned to Clara, his pleas dripping with a sickening blend of false remorse and manipulative charm. Clara, please. I know I messed up, but I can make this right. Just let me sleep on the couch. Just for a few nights. I can get back on my feet. We can fix this for Leo. He reached for her hand, his eyes wide and pleading. But Clara, finally seeing him without the rose-tinted glasses of love, was stronger than Eleanor had ever dared to hope. She pulled her hand away, her voice clear and unwavering. No, Vincent, you didn't come back because you want to make things right. You came back because your other option disappeared. Her words, delivered with a quiet dignity, were a revelation to Eleanor. Clara was truly free. Vincent, desperate, turned his attention to Eleanor, trying to pull her into his manipulative web. Mrs. Thompson, surely you can talk some sense into her. We have a family, a child. This is for the best, for everyone. He tried to project an image of concern, of a man seeking wise counsel. Eleanor's response was swift and merciless, her voice devoid of any warmth. No, what? No, I won't talk sense into her. No, having you in their lives isn't better for them. Her eyes, usually so soft, were now hard as diamonds. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the killing blow. Everything that's happened to you in the past week, Vincent, your job loss, your lost client, Felicia leaving you, the bank demanding more paperwork for your condo application, none of it was coincidence. Vincent's eyes widened, a dawning horror spreading across his face. What are you talking about? He stammered, his voice choked. Eleanor reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and opened her banking app. She turned the screen toward him, displaying the staggering balance. $28,400,000. Vincent stared at the numbers, his jaw slack. Eleanor watched his face, devoid of emotion as she spoke. Arthur's fortune, my fortune, the one you dismissed as meager, the one you thought wasn't worth your time. She then calmly explained how she had orchestrated his downfall, step by meticulous step, leveraging her wealth and influence to protect her daughter and grandson from his parasitic nature. I did it to show you that there are consequences for betrayal. I did it because you broke my daughter's heart, and I did it because you called me free babysitting and a burden. Vincent staggered back, his face a mask of disbelief and utter devastation. You, you destroyed my life, he gasped, the words ripped from his throat. No, Vincent, Eleanor corrected him, her voice chillingly calm. You destroyed your own life. I merely held up a mirror. Clara, her eyes filled with a newfound strength, stepped forward. You're not my husband, Vincent, she stated, her voice resonating with power. And you're not Leo's father. Not anymore. You're just a man who made terrible choices, and now you have to live with them. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, Vincent stumbled toward the door, his arrogant swagger replaced by a broken shuffle. As he reached for the doorknob, Eleanor delivered her final parting shot. Oh, and Vincent, she called out, her voice clear and firm, your car will be repossessed by this evening, and all of your credit cards are being canceled, effective immediately. Consider it the final logistics. He flinched, then pulled the door open and stumbled out, leaving them in a profound silence that felt, at last, truly free. 6 months had passed since Vincent stumbled out of Clara's house, leaving behind the shattered remnants of his own making. The change in their lives was palpable, a vibrant transformation from the shadow-filled existence Clara had endured. We were now thriving in a spacious new home, a sun-drenched sanctuary nestled in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It was a place designed for growth, for laughter, and for healing, purchased discreetly through one of Eleanor's many holdings. Clara, once a fragile ghost of her former self, had blossomed. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that radiated from within, her eyes bright with purpose. Inspired by her own harrowing journey, she was now pursuing a graduate degree in family counseling. Each textbook, each lecture, fueled her passion to help other women navigate the treacherous waters of manipulative relationships. She pored over her studies during Leo's naps, her determination unwavering, proving to herself and to the world that she was capable of building a meaningful life beyond her past trauma. And Leo, sweet Leo, now 10 months old, was the epitome of pure joy. He crawled with boundless energy, his infectious giggle filling the house with warmth. He was a happy, robust baby, growing up surrounded by an abundance of unconditional love and unwavering stability. He was oblivious to the storms that had once raged, a testament to the peaceful haven we had built around him. His presence was a constant reminder of the profound good that could emerge from even the darkest of circumstances. The legal proceedings to sever all ties with Vincent had been swift and decisive, thanks to Daniel Lee's relentless efficiency. Clara received full custody of Leo, ensuring Vincent had no claim over their son's life. The house she had shared with Vincent, a place that held so many painful memories, was hers, along with a substantial alimony package that ensured her financial security as she pursued her education. Vincent's supervised visitation rights, a meager offering from the court, remained unused. He hadn't bothered to see Leo, further confirming his true indifference. Vincent's professional life, just as Eleanor had meticulously planned, never recovered. His reputation, shredded by the loss of sterling tech and whispers of his unethical conduct, made him radioactive in the Sacramento business community. The last Eleanor heard, he was working as a retail sales associate, struggling to keep afloat under the crushing weight of his debts and the court-ordered child support, which, thanks to Daniel Lee, was far from the minimal amount he had originally proposed. He had fallen from his self-proclaimed pedestal, landing hard in the harsh reality he had so arrogantly avoided. Sarah Davies delivered her final comprehensive report one crisp autumn afternoon. It detailed Vincent's long history of financial fraud and manipulation, a pattern that stretched back to his college days. There were forged academic records, inflated resume claims, and numerous instances of petty theft and exploitation of vulnerable individuals. It painted a picture of a man who had always taken shortcuts, always sought to profit from deception. This report, Eleanor knew, would be crucial if Vincent ever tried to resurface, legally or otherwise. But Eleanor's efforts extended beyond simply dismantling Vincent's life. Guided by her own painful observations and Arthur's legacy, she had quietly established a foundation dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships. Funded anonymously through her Project Phoenix account, it provided legal aid, safe housing, and counseling services, a silent testament to her commitment to turning her personal pain into a source of widespread good. Then one morning, Daniel Lee called. His voice was unusually grave. "Eleanor, I have some news regarding Vincent Richardson." Eleanor braced herself. "He was arrested last night. Credit card fraud and identity theft. It seems he was attempting to open several lines of credit using Clara's old personal information, things he had access to before the divorce was finalized." Eleanor felt no surge of triumph, only a quiet resolve. This was not about revenge anymore. It was about justice. When she relayed the news to Clara, her daughter's reaction was surprisingly muted. There was no pity, no anger, just a profound emptiness. "He's just irrelevant, Mom," Clara said, her voice soft. "He doesn't even exist in our world anymore." It was the ultimate dismissal, a quiet victory far more powerful than any loud celebration. Later that evening, as the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, Eleanor found Clara on the porch swing, watching Leo play in the yard. Clara turned to her, her eyes glistening. "Mom," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have listened to you." Eleanor sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "No, darling," she reassured her, her voice gentle. "You loved him, and love makes us want to believe the best about people. That's not a flaw, Clara. It's one of your greatest strengths. It's what makes you so wonderful, so different from him." Clara leaned into her mother's embrace, a peaceful smile gracing her lips. I think I finally understand that," she said, a new lightness in her voice. "I'm whole, Mom. I'm whole all by myself, no matter what." Eleanor watched Leo, now fast asleep in his crib, bathed in the soft glow of the nightlight. He would grow up in a home built on respect, on unconditional love, and on the quiet strength of two women who had faced a storm and emerged, not just survivors, but thrivers. The storm was finally over. The family was safe, whole, and stronger than ever. Their thriving a testament to a quiet, powerful justice.